Step into a hot shower. Right now if you can. Or close your eyes and put yourself there. Make the water hot. Hot enough that for the first second you flinch. Stand under it. Do not move. Do not reach for the soap. Just stand there for 3 minutes and notice nothing in particular. Here is what no one ever told you. While you were standing there noticing nothing, your blood pressure fell by roughly 15 millimeters of mercury. Your heart rate climbed by 20 to 30 beats per minute. Your skin opened up 6 liters of blood per minute that was not flowing there before. And inside the cells lining the blood vessels of your arms and your legs and your scalp, a tiny chemical messenger called nitric oxide began pouring into the tissue like a signal flare. You did nothing. The water did everything. I want to walk you through exactly what is going on inside you when you take a hot shower. Not the poetic version. Not the wellness blog version. The mechanical version. Because what happens under your skin during those 3 minutes is closer to a precision-engineered cardiovascular event than to anything that should be called relaxation. Let me show you the parts. Your skin is your largest organ. Something like 1.5 to 2 square meters of surface area, depending on your size. Woven through every square centimeter of that surface is a network of blood vessels. Tiny arteries called arterioles. Even tinier capillaries that come right up to the underside of the epidermis. Venules that drain the blood back toward your heart. In ordinary room temperature conditions, your skin receives about 250 milliliters of blood per minute. That is roughly 5% of the blood your heart pumps. When you turn on the hot water and step under it, that number can climb by a factor of 25. Now what makes that happen? It starts with little molecular gates sitting right at the surface of your skin, embedded in the membranes of the nerve endings that wait there for information about the outside world. The gates are called TRPV1 channels. The name does not matter. What matters is that they open when the temperature around them rises above about 43 degrees Celsius. They are the same channels, incidentally, that capsaicin from chili peppers opens. That is why hot peppers feel hot. The pepper is not delivering heat. It is fooling the same gate that real heat would open. When those gates open, the nerve fires. The signal runs up the nerve, into the spinal cord, and up to your hypothalamus, the temperature control headquarters buried in the deep middle of your brain, behind your eyes, just above the roof of your mouth. And your hypothalamus does something worth knowing about. It tells the sympathetic nerves that have been quietly constricting your skin's blood vessels to let go. I have to pause and tell you about the sympathetic nervous system, because it is one of the most underrated parts of you. The sympathetic nervous system is the part of you that keeps your blood vessels squeezed. Not just sometimes, all the time. Every minute of every day. Without it, your blood would pool in your feet and your brain would lose pressure as soon as you stood up. Your skin vessels in particular live in a state of constant mild constriction. The technical term is vasoconstrictor tone. There is a continuous low-level squeeze, mediated by a chemical called norepinephrine, that keeps your skin from acting as a giant blood reservoir. When your hypothalamus decides you are too hot, it removes the squeeze. The skin vessels dilate. They open up, and here is the part I find really interesting. The opening does not happen by pulling on the muscle. It happens by releasing a molecule. The cells that line the inside of every blood vessel in your body, they are called endothelial cells. And there are roughly 1 trillion of them in an adult, covering an area about the size of 6 tennis courts if you spread them out flat. Those cells start producing nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a tiny gas molecule. 1 nitrogen atom, 1 oxygen atom. It diffuses out of the endothelial cells into the smooth muscle wrapped around the outside of the vessel, and it tells that smooth muscle to relax. The vessel widens. Blood pours through it. Christopher Minson at the University of Oregon has spent years measuring this. His lab puts subjects in hot tubs at 40 degrees Celsius, a temperature slightly above what most people set their showers to, and measures every cardiovascular variable they can get an instrument on. He has shown that immersion in hot water produces increases in skin blood flow that look almost identical to what happens during moderate exercise. The arms get warm and pink. The face flushes. The scalp tingles. That is 6 liters of blood per minute moving through tissue that, 2 minutes ago, was receiving 1/4 of a liter. You did this with water. You did not lift a finger. But here is what you may not have thought about. If the blood vessels in your skin have opened to accept 30 times their normal flow, where is that blood coming from? It cannot be created in 3 minutes. It has to be coming from somewhere else in your body. This is the part the doctor would find interesting. Blood pressure is, at its most basic, the force per unit area that the blood exerts on the walls of your arteries. It depends on 2 things: how hard the heart is pumping, and how much resistance the arteries are putting up against the flow. When you open up the skin vessels, when you remove all that vasoconstrictor tone, the total resistance in your body drops. That means the pressure drops with it. In a healthy adult standing under a hot shower for 3 minutes, systolic blood pressure, that is the top number. The pressure when the heart contracts typically falls by 10 to 15 millimeters of mercury. The bottom number, the diastolic, can fall by 5 to 10. If you were lying on a doctor's exam table and your blood pressure dropped like that for no reason, the doctor would be worried. In a hot shower, it is the expected response. The body knew it was coming. The body is fine. Your body does not just let the pressure fall, of course. It corrects. There are stretch receptors in the walls of your carotid arteries. Right where they branch in your neck, you can feel the pulse there with 2 fingers. And in the wall of your aortic arch, just above the heart. These are called baroreceptors. They are constantly measuring the stretch of the artery wall, which is a proxy for blood pressure. When the stretch goes down, they fire less. And when they fire less, they tell the brainstem to do 2 things: increase the heart rate and reactivate the sympathetic nervous system everywhere except the skin. Your heart beats faster, maybe 20 to 30 beats per minute faster. The vessels in your gut and your kidneys constrict, sending more blood back into central circulation. The cardiac output, the total volume of blood the heart moves per minute, climbs. In some measurements it nearly doubles. You do not feel any of this. You feel warm. This is not a benign little event. It is a coordinated cardiovascular response that touches every major regulatory system in your body. And it is happening because you turned a knob in your bathroom. Now I want you to picture someone for a moment. The man over 60 with mildly elevated blood pressure, who has been told by his doctor to exercise more, who has knees that do not cooperate, who has a treadmill in the basement gathering dust, who has tried medication and disliked the side effects, who reads about cardiovascular health in the newspaper and sighs. I am describing him because his cardiovascular system every morning in his own shower is doing the thing his doctor told him to make it do. He does not know it is doing it. Nobody told him. He is, in those 3 minutes, undergoing a physiological event that bears a strong family resemblance to a short bout of moderate aerobic exercise. He is just not aware that it counts. It counts. Now I want you to think about what this whole response resembles. You are warm. Your heart rate is climbing. Your blood vessels are dilated. Cardiac output is up. Skin blood flow is up. Your endothelial cells are pumping out nitric oxide. If I described this list to you without telling you what caused it, you might guess that I was describing a brisk walk. You would be close. But there is something else happening that does not happen during a walk. And it is happening at the molecular level, deep inside the cells. Inside every cell in your body, proteins are folding. Proteins are long chains of amino acids that have to fold into precise 3-dimensional shapes to do their jobs. The shape is everything. A protein that has misfolded does not work. When a cell gets hot, even a little hot, 2 or 3 degrees above its normal temperature, the proteins start to misfold. They wobble. They expose oily patches that should be tucked safely inside. They begin to clump. This is dangerous. A cell full of misfolded proteins stops working. If it gets bad enough, the cell dies. So your cells have a response. They produce a family of molecules called heat shock proteins. The most studied one in the cardiovascular literature is called heat shock protein 70. When the cell heats up, The gene that codes for this protein turns on, and the cell starts manufacturing it in large quantities. Heat shock protein 70 then moves around inside the cell and helps refold the damaged proteins. It is a molecular repair crew. That is the obvious job. But it is not the interesting job. The interesting job is what heat shock protein 70 also does on the side. It dampens inflammation. It stabilizes cell membranes. It reduces the production of reactive oxygen species. Those are the molecules people are talking about when they talk about oxidative stress. It seems to help insulin signaling in muscle and liver cells. It protects against the cellular damage caused by ischemia, which is the term for tissue that has been deprived of blood. In animal models, hearts that have been preconditioned with mild heat exposure tolerate a subsequent heart attack better than hearts that have not. The damage zone is smaller. The recovery is faster. Earl Noble and colleagues at the University of Western Ontario have published work showing that repeated mild heat exposure increases heat shock protein 70 expression in skeletal muscle, and that this increase is associated with improved insulin sensitivity and reduced markers of inflammation. In humans, after repeated hot water immersion, not after exercise alone, heat does some of the same things exercise does, through a different door. The shower is talking to the inside of your cells, which brings us to the question of what happens if you do this not once, but every day, or close to every day, for years. A single hot shower is a cardiovascular event. A hot shower routine is a cardiovascular training program. The endothelium, that single layer of cells lining the inside of every blood vessel, is not just a passive pipe wall. It is an organ. It senses pressure. It senses flow. It produces molecules that dilate vessels, constrict vessels, fight clotting, control inflammation, regulate the growth of the vessel wall itself. When the endothelium is healthy, blood pressure stays well regulated, the arteries stay flexible, and the risk of cardiovascular disease is low. When the endothelium is dysfunctional, when it cannot produce enough nitric oxide, when it cannot respond properly to flow, you are on the road to hypertension, atherosclerosis, and the whole cascade of bad outcomes that follows. How do you train the endothelium? You expose it to flow. When blood rushes through a vessel, really rushes, at high velocity the endothelial cells experience what is called shear stress. The blood is dragging across their surface. They respond to that drag by producing more nitric oxide. Over weeks and months, repeated shear stress upregulates the enzyme that makes nitric oxide, which is called endothelial nitric oxide synthase. The vessels become more responsive to flow. The endothelium learns. Exercise produces shear stress. So does heat. Vienna Brunt and Christopher Minson at the University of Oregon published a study in 2016 in the Journal of Physiology. They took healthy young adults who were sedentary, not exercising, and they had them do hot water immersion 4 to 5 times a week for 8 weeks, 40 degrees Celsius, up to the shoulders. Each session brought core body temperature up by about 1 degree. At the end of 8 weeks, the subject's resting blood pressure had dropped. Their endothelial function, measured by a technique called flow-mediated dilation, had improved. Their arterial stiffness, measured by pulse wave velocity, had decreased. Some of the changes were comparable to what you would expect from an aerobic training program of similar duration. These were people sitting in hot water, not exercising. Sitting. Now, a shower is not a hot tub. You are not fully immersed. The thermal load is smaller. The thermal load of a 3-minute shower is much smaller than that of a 30-minute hot tub. But the mechanism is the same. The skin vessels open. The cardiac output rises. The endothelium experiences flow. And over months and years, if you do this regularly, the endothelium responds. There is one more piece of evidence I want to bring in. Because the cardiovascular effects of regular heat exposure have been studied in a much larger population than American researchers usually get to study them in. Finland. Finland has saunas the way other countries have living rooms. There are about 2 million saunas in Finland for a population of 5.5 million people. The Finns have been using saunas for hundreds of years. And starting in 1984, researchers at the University of Eastern Finland enrolled a cohort of about 2,300 middle-aged men in a study originally designed to look at heart disease risk factors. The study became known as the Kuopio Ischemic Heart Disease Risk Factor Study. In 2015, Jari Laukkanen and his colleagues published the sauna findings in the journal JAMA Internal Medicine. They had followed these men for an average of 20 years. They had recorded how often each man used a sauna, and at what temperatures and for how long. And they had recorded cause of death. Here is what they found. Men who used a sauna 4 to 7 times per week, compared to men who used a sauna once per week, had a 50% lower risk of dying from a cardiovascular event over those 20 years. 50%. The risk of sudden cardiac death was 63% lower. The all-cause mortality was 40% lower. This is an observational study. The men who used saunas more often were probably healthier in other ways. Laukkanen and his team adjusted for the obvious confounders: exercise, smoking, blood pressure, cholesterol, body mass index, socioeconomic status, alcohol consumption. The association held, but adjustment is never perfect. There may be residual factors they could not measure. What we can say with more confidence is that the mechanism is plausible. The vasodilation, the blood pressure response, the heat shock proteins, the endothelial conditioning, these all predict that repeated heat exposure should be good for the cardiovascular system. The Finnish data is consistent with those mechanisms. They are pointing in the same direction. A hot shower is not a sauna. The Finns sit in their saunas for 15 to 30 minutes at temperatures of 80 to 100 degrees Celsius. A 3-minute shower at 40 degrees is a much smaller thermal stimulus. You should not expect a 50% reduction in cardiovascular mortality from your morning shower. That is not what the mechanism says. But the mechanism is the same, and the direction is the same. I want to pause and be honest with you about how confident you should be in each piece of what I have just told you, because I think trust depends on being told what the limits of the evidence are. The vasodilation, the blood pressure drop, the heart rate increase, the skin blood flow increase. These 4 things are not in question. They have been measured thousands of times in laboratories around the world. You can put a person under a hot shower with a blood pressure cuff and a heart rate monitor, and you will see the response. Every time. This is settled physiology. Call this the granite layer. The heat shock protein response is also well established at the molecular level. The proteins increase, the gene expression has been mapped. The mechanism of heat shock protein 70 and protein folding is known at the atomic level. The downstream effects on inflammation and insulin signaling have been demonstrated in cell culture and in animal models and in some human studies. Call this the firm clay layer. The pieces are real. The downstream link to long-term clinical benefit is plausible but inferred. The endothelial conditioning effect from repeated heat exposure has been demonstrated in small human studies, including the Brunt and Minson work. The sample sizes are modest. The effects are real and statistically significant. The duration of the studies is short, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. We do not have a 15-year randomized controlled trial of hot showers versus cold showers in middle-aged adults. We probably never will, because no one will fund such a trial. So we are extrapolating from short-term physiological studies and from the Finnish observational data. Call this the working hypothesis layer. The cardiovascular mortality reduction from saunas is suggestive but not causal. It is an observational finding. The mechanistic plausibility is strong. The clinical recommendation that flows from it is still, try it, it appears safe in healthy people, it may help, and it is consistent with everything else we know about cardiovascular conditioning. Call this the educated guess layer. And there is one honest note I have to include. If you have heart failure, severe aortic valve disease, certain arrhythmias, or unstable cardiovascular disease, hot water immersion can be dangerous. The blood pressure drop and the heart rate increase that I have described as a benign event in a healthy adult can be a trigger for a serious problem in someone whose heart is already struggling. If you are in that category, Please talk to your cardiologist before you change your shower routine. For everyone else, the mechanisms are real. The direction is favorable. The strongest evidence sits at the level of immediate physiology. The weakest evidence sits at the level of long-term clinical outcomes. Now, I want to point something out that I think is worth thinking about. The nitric oxide pathway, the one I have been describing as the central mechanism of cutaneous vasodilation, the one that the endothelium uses to dilate vessels everywhere in your body. That pathway is exactly the same pathway exploited by a class of drugs that has been used for cardiovascular disease for over 100 years. Nitroglycerin, the little pill that someone with angina puts under their tongue. The pill that has been saving lives since the 1870s. What does it do? It gets converted in the body to nitric oxide. The nitric oxide diffuses into the smooth muscle of the coronary arteries. The vessels dilate. Chest pain stops. The same molecule your endothelium just released into your skin vessels in the shower is the active ingredient in nitroglycerin. The same enzyme cascade. The same final effect on the vessel wall. There is also an entire class of medications used for erectile dysfunction, sildenafil, tadalafil, the others, that work by blocking the breakdown of cyclic GMP, which is the second messenger that nitric oxide triggers inside the smooth muscle cell. They do not create the pathway. They amplify it. They turn up the volume on something your endothelium already does. Your hot shower is producing nitric oxide. The pharmaceutical industry has built an enormous business on top of that same pathway. This is not a conspiracy. This is physiology. The drugs work because the pathway exists. The pathway exists because evolution built it into the lining of your blood vessels. I am not saying that a hot shower replaces nitroglycerin in someone who is having an angina attack. It does not. The dose is wrong. The timing is wrong. The bioavailability is wrong. If you are having chest pain, take the pill. Call the ambulance. A pharmaceutical exists for a reason. It concentrates the effect into a controlled, predictable, fast-acting dose. The drug is doing in 5 minutes what your endothelium does over 20 minutes of slow build. But here is the reframe. This is not hydrotherapy in the wellness spa sense. This is not aromatherapy. This is not a metaphor for self-care. This is the same molecular pathway that the cardiology pharmacopoeia has been built on top of for 150 years, running every morning through the pipes in your bathroom. Free. Available. Requiring no prescription and no copay. The body's version is milder. The pharmaceutical version is concentrated. They are doing the same thing. Your grandmother knew. She told you that a hot bath would do you good when you came in from the cold. She told you that you needed some color in your cheeks. She told you not to leap straight out of the bath and into the freezing hallway. She did not know about nitric oxide synthase. She did not know about heat shock protein 70. She did not know about the carotid baroreflex. She just knew that when you came in from the cold and you got into a hot bath, you felt better afterward. You slept better. Your aches eased. Your hands warmed up. You were calmer. She was describing, in 3 sentences, the same physiology I have just walked you through in 30 minutes. She had different words for it. Her words were correct. So, 3 minutes. A hot shower. Here is what I would like you to do. Notice it. The next time you step under hot water, do not reach for the soap immediately. Stand still for 60 seconds. Feel your scalp tingle. Feel the warmth move down your arms into your fingertips. Feel your chest open. That is 6 liters of blood per minute, redirecting from your core into your skin. That is the endothelium releasing nitric oxide into the vessel wall. That is your heart beating 30 beats per minute faster to compensate for the dilated vasculature. That is heat shock protein 70 beginning to express in your skeletal muscle cells. That is the same molecular pathway that nitroglycerin uses, running on the standard hot water heater in your basement. Your body is doing physics. You did not have to think about any of it. The water turned the knob. A hot bath will do you good. When you next step into a hot shower, tell me the first thing you notice that you had not noticed before.